You're watching BCTV. We're all about Brantford. You're watching BCTV, Brantford Government Television, a service of Brantford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Brantford.
Okay, we're going to get started. Town of Brantford Board of Finance, regular meeting for September 26, 2022. First on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the August 29th, 2022 meeting.
I read through them, Joe. I thought they're very thorough. This I'll move them.
I'll second it, Joe.
Motion's been made, seconded by Jeff. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, before we get further on in the agenda, just like to note that Harry Diadamo is on the phone participating. He's not able to attend the meeting, but he's attending via my phone. Second on the agenda is citizens communication. If there's anyone from the audience who'd like to comment on the agenda items, they're welcome to come forward at this time. Okay. Sir.
Will we have a chance during the actual individual items to?
Not unless you're part of the presentation, so
Okay.
if you want to come up and try to limit it to 3 minutes, but I'll give you time to.
I'll be quick. I'm Peter Henschel. I'm the chair of the Coastal Vulnerability Working Group, and I'm basically here to support item number. Where is it? 8. Okay. Item 8 on your agenda for the allocation of some of the Coastal Resilience Fund to a particular project. Just to basically give you a little bit more information to follow up on Jim Finch's letter to you. This was a project that was initiated originally, an initiative of the Coastal Vulnerability Working Group. It was developed further into an actual project concept by the joint committee of the working group and the WPCA as a little sub-meeting group. And that was the ultimate objective of that was to develop an RFP for services. The idea is that this funding would allow us to begin the first steps of that study. Just to give you a very quick idea of what's in the RFP, I'll just read the first paragraph, the intent. This is a draft RFP. It hasn't gone out yet, but the intent of this particular RFP would be the town of Brantford is soliciting proposals for climate resilience engineering evaluation of the Brantford water pollution control facility and sanitary sewer system. The proposal will result in a contract intended to produce a report with measurements, inspection results, survey information, and risk identification of the respective facilities, as well as conclusions, options, and recommendations for further study of the complete system. The initial task is intended to be completed within 4 months of the award. The selected consultant will work with the designated customer, the co-chairs of the WPCA, and the Coastal Vulnerability Working Group. So that just gives you a quick idea what the intent of this allocation would be. And we certainly would support your approval.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Appreciate the comments.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, if not, we'll move on to number 3, is to hear a presentation on the virtual net metering agreement between the town and Verogi, and to provide a recommendation pursuant to 42-1 of the code. Jamie?
Yeah. Thank you, Joe. So recall last month we heard a presentation from the Clean Energy Committee. As you know, there's really 4 basic areas that the Clean Energy Committee has been focused on: energy efficiency and building performance, renewable energy, transportation, and microgrids. For the last couple of years, actually, we've been looking at this project, which is with Verogi. It is a power purchase agreement under a virtual net metering arrangement. Joined here today is, you met last month, Shirley McCarthy, the chair of the Clean Energy Committee, but Brian Fitzgerald, who can speak and answer questions regarding the specifics of the project. Just to give an overview, we have, this is another area example of a project where we're looking to try to have some, not only constraint, but I would say also stability within our electric allocations. We have Brantford's is familiar with the virtual net metering. We have a virtual net metering with another company, which a solar array is built on town property. We have a 20-year agreement. We identify a meter at the Wastewater Pollution Control Authority, and we receive credits off of our utility bill for the amount of power that is put into the grid from that project. And there is a net benefit to the town, financial benefit to the town. This is a very similar arrangement. However, this solar array would be built actually in another municipality. So it's built by Verigy in another town. However, there's a number of meters. We're allowed to identify up to 10 meters to receive a very similar benefit. I would just say, this is before you as under 42-1 financial review, financial obligation review. Brian can get into the specifics, but we also did test this in terms of made some assumptions if things would change in the market and change, but yet the project still proved to be cash flow positive to the town when you consider the full 20 years of the project. With that, I'll turn it over to Brian to give an overview of the committee, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Jamie. Brian?
Absolutely.
Welcome.
Thank you, First Selectman and Mr. Chair, members of the board. That was a fantastic overview by the First Selectman on virtual net metering. Generally speaking, this project will operate in that same program, and then again, that program really is just there so that developers like us can develop projects and allocate these renewable energy credits to 3 different customer types: municipalities, agriculture, and state off-takers. So we would be operating under the municipal sector here, where we are allocating credits from a project that we developed and constructed in Bristol, Connecticut, to up to 10 Brantford accounts. Right now, we currently have 8 accounts identified that we'll be allocating credits to, and specifically, those are the Orchard House, the Town Hall, the Transfer Station, the VNA Broadcasting Station, Willoughby Wallace Library, the Community House, Counseling Center, and the Wastewater Treatment Plant. As time goes on, those allocations and accounts can change. You can change them once per year. Say, for example, if consumption changes or new facilities brought online that you'd like to allocate credits to, that can all change working through the Eversource program, so there's no real worries or constraints on that front. Like I said, the project was developed, is already constructed, and is already operational. As the First Selectman mentioned in his memo this evening, we were on the wait list for quite some time. Additional funding had opened up earlier this year. PURA kind of mandated Eversource to allocate unused credits, and because we were in a good position on the wait list, we were able to take advantage of those unused credits right now. So as it stands today, we have an executed V&M service agreement with Eversource and our agricultural host for the project. So all that's really left to get set up for the end of the year is to execute the power purchase agreement. Now, that power purchase agreement is very, very similar in framework to the one you currently have executed. There's no capital outlay today for the town of Brantford, and it is based on Brantford is committing to purchase all of the power that is produced from that system, and it's essentially in credit form. So how it works is the project in Bristol produces electricity. Energy goes into the grid at that location, and then credits in a monetary form are allocated to the 8 accounts that we've identified through the program. And then we have the virtual net metering credit agreement to buy and sell those credits. So as it stands today, our V&M credit agreement is a fixed price agreement, whereas the value of the V&M credit essentially tracks the rate of electricity currently from its general service charge component and transmission and distribution. So the credit value is essentially made up of those two components. As the cost of electricity increases, the V&M credit value increases, and the value of the monetary credit also goes up that arrives on the bill. Now that's great for Brantford in the situation because we have a fixed price agreement. You will capture all of that upside. And also, as the first selectman mentioned, we ran multiple sensitivities where we forecasted this rate of electricity and the V&M credit price to understand what would happen in a scenario where electricity prices kind of go against the grain that they've traded at, and they decrease over time. We say, at what level does the project become, cash flow negative or savings neutral for that matter? So we've run those sensitivities, and we're pretty confident with where we've gotten to at a 9.5 cent credit rate against the current value. Now, with that said, our current savings are estimated to be about $1.4 million over the 20-year term, and that's allocating about 1.7 million kilowatt hours of electricity credits per year. So that's essentially where we are now, and like I mentioned, we've crossed all the other hurdles, all the regulatory components. We're just down to the point of ironing out and executing the V&M credit purchase agreement.
So has the Board of Selectmen approved this?
No, I bring it to the Board of Selectmen
After us. And who's vetted this on the town side?
So myself and the finance director have been involved throughout the process. And the sustainability manager.
And who?
Sustainability manager,
Okay.
Diana, was involved in this process. And I would just also say, as far as, we have some members on the Clean Energy Committee, and unfortunately Elena Cahill couldn't be here tonight, but she's very familiar with this market, and she assisted in that vetting as well on the town side.
Okay. So I don't know if any of the board members is familiar with this type of financing, but I'm not directly familiar with it, so we're trusting, I guess, Jim's analysis, which we immensely trust, as well as your judgment on this, that this is a viable 20-year arrangement that the town should enter into.
Yeah, and I think it's more, we will not own this asset. We know for 20 years we're gonna be buying power,
Right.
electricity, right? So it's, and we look for, we go to the market, we look at, arrangements. And as I said, when we have a similar arrangement with the, right here in town. So this is really, and again, going through that essentially stress test or shock test of what would have to happen within the markets before this becomes neutral, where the credits and the cost of the power become, we don't realize those credits. And it was, we felt comfortable at that point after going through that level of analysis where we felt there's really strong upside to the town. Also, this is, the Brantford, I think, in terms of outside of the financial benefit of it, in terms of promoting clean energy and additional energy right into our grid, that's what we're doing in terms of supporting this type of effort, rather than buying credits from somewhere that's, outside of the New England grid and being put into it.
Okay. Questions from the board? And then I know you want to continue. Charlie?
A solar farm that's being built in Bristol, what was the source of the funding for that?
So the project was privately financed. It participates in the LREC-ZREC program.
I'm sorry, it was financed by who?
Oh, privately financed by our financiers.
Okay.
Yep.
And so the energy that's created is going to be sold to Eversource?
Effectively, yes. So the energy.
And so Eversource then generates credits.
Correct.
They sell to their customers.
Eversource is not going to sell Brantford the credit. Eversource is going to apply the credit to Brantford,
Oh.
and then the credit gets sold by the project. So the project has an agreement with Brantford. The project delivers the energy to Eversource to facilitate.
Okay, are we obligated to buy the credits?
In the agreement, you'd be obligated to buy the credits, yes.
Is there a certain amount of credits that we have to buy every year?
Correct. Right now, the assumption, based on our projections, is about 1.7 million kilowatt hours per year
Okay.
in credits.
I mean, is that,
But the project also has to produce.
Correct.
So we're only buying what is actually, there's not a risk of us buying something that we're not actually going to receive a credit for. So it's a one for one. For every kilowatt hour that's put into the grid that we have to buy, that 1.7 that we're signing up, they also have to put that into the grid. Therefore, we will then receive the credit.
okay. No, I'm
Correct.
trying to understand the flow of the action here.
Absolutely. So essentially, the credit's going to arrive on those indicated bills of the accounts that we've identified, and then the payment would be processed for the amount of credits that were delivered. So you're effectively getting delivered a credit that is worth more than you're paying for, and that's how Brantford would realize the savings.
Okay, now we have these buildings that you've identified. Are we free to choose other buildings every year?
Once a year, you said.
Correct. You could change allocations. You could allocate to up to 10 accounts. So right now, we have 8 accounts identified. So you could add 2 more, but we'd have to change the allocations
Okay.
that we've currently identified.
So could we shrink it down to only 5 and have more credits per 5?
Depends on the accounts you have and the total usage at those accounts. So it's really dependent on how large of an energy user that one account is.
All right.
So in order to get the 1.7 million, those 8 buildings would satisfy that, meeting that
Correct.
demand. If we find, we say divested of a building, or a building also, we introduce some additional conservation measures, and we feel that there's some additional credits there to be had, we have the capacity to add another meter, or 2 additional meters, or if we want to, if we have identified a building that's in town that has much greater energy consumption than one of the 8, and we want to just assign it to that meter, we did. So we're not offsetting our full energy use portfolio with this, but we're identifying 8 buildings that would meet this capacity.
Out of curiosity, how do the private investors get paid?
So effectively, you have long-term contracts for the purchase and the sale of electricity and energy credits. So they look at it in the sense of, okay, we're going to finance permanent debt over a long period of time, say 15 years, based on the fact that we have a 15-year REC contract to sell the renewable energy credits to Eversource, and then a 20-year power purchase agreement to sell the energy credits to an investment-grade off-taker, that is Brantford.
That's good, Charlie, thank you. Other questions? Anything else you'd like to expand on?
I think the one thing I'd mention now, just to kind of piggyback on the first selectman's note on the analysis, over the last few years, electricity rates that we've all seen have increased about 30 to 40% from 2021 to 2022. So knowing that this might not be the new norm, our analysis has captured that large increase to say, okay, rates aren't going to be here forever. What happens if they go back down? And under those tests, we're still very comfortable on the savings analysis that we put forth today.
Okay, that's part of the shock test that you did on your own.
Correct.
Harry, do you have any questions?
No, well, the question is, are we forwarding this to the Board of Selectmen?
Yes.
Final approval?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay, I think we're good. Do we have a proposed resolution here, unless we have other questions? Resolved that the Board of Finance favorably recommends that the Board of Selectmen enter into a solar virtual net metering agreement with Verigy, thank you, Verigy, for a period of 20 years in which the town of Brantford receives virtual net metering credits for selected meters.
I'll move the resolution.
Been moved by Victor,
Second.
seconded by Harry. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Selectman.
Number 4 on the agenda is to consider and if appropriate, approve a transfer request from the Sustainability and Compliance Manager for fiscal 22 solid waste management and recycling budget as follows: from overtime, $6,349, into other fuel, $5,517, and advertising, $832, for a total of $6,349. Who's covering this one?
Anyways.
Yeah, I'll present.
Okay.
So, the other fuel costs, certainly we saw a significant increase in fuel, so that's what's driving that. I believe you saw last month with the number of other departments as well. And the advertising, we changed one of the collection routes or number of streets, so we did some additional communication to those areas to change the collection day that those streets were there. So we did an additional mailing to those neighborhoods to notify them. So that's why there was a shortfall in advertising, printing and advertising.
All right, thanks. Questions on this transfer?
I'll move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff,
Second.
seconded by Pam. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, Harry, thank you. Number 5, to consider and if appropriate, transfer request from Brantford Counseling and Community Services, fiscal 22, from regular salaries and wages, $9,187, into credit card processing, $2,000, insurances, $6,079, postage, $103, technology, $657, furniture and fixtures, $242, and overtime, $106, for a total of $9,187. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Joe.
Any enlightenment on this?
I think there's if we look at the property and liability insurance is $6,000, because when we put it in our budget, we weren't really sure what the costs were going to be, and we tried to base it on previous years. So it came in a little high, and that's why that we had to put more money into that line item. Hopefully, we're going to be able to get an idea prior to us doing the budget.
Okay.
So.
So this is just property and GL, it's got nothing to do with any other liabilities?
I think it covers our liability in regards to the clinicians. So it's also liability with the staff.
Okay.
Did you break some furniture?
I'm sorry?
Did you break any furniture?
Not yet.
Well,
Only $242, so we didn't break a lot. The credit card processing fees, I think we went for $1,500 out of the previous budget, and we're making money by processing these cards, so we have to increase that a little bit just to cover those costs.
Good, thanks. Other questions from Peter? This transfer?
I'll move it.
Been moved by Jeff, seconded by Victor. Got any questions, Harry?
No, sir.
Is there additional discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Joe.
Number 6 is to consider and if appropriate, approve a transfer request from the Director of Human Resources for fiscal 22 for the following: HRIS services, from HRIS services, $6,540, into employment testing, $6,290, and longevity, $250. And a second, and that's in the HR budget, and then a second request is within the fire budget, from contingency, $141,107, into regular salaries and wages, $91,691, overtime, $67.50, public events, $450, vacations, $75.05, holidays, $6,009, sick pay, $3,552, education incentive, $35.97, accrued payroll, $353, stipends, $19,500, and uniforms, $1,700 for the $141,107. Before we go back to that first one, Jim, what's the contingency?
Sure.
Balance?
The contingency balance, and this is
It's the old one.
This one's a new year contingency transfer.
Oh, that?
2020.
Oh, yeah, okay,
No,
got it.
that's okay, that's right. It's $850,233.
Thanks.
After?
Yeah, after. Margaret, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. So the employment testing, as you may all may recall, is kind of a moving target. It's always based on the number of hires from in that fiscal year. The employment testing is primarily the CDL medical testing that we do for all new hires, the drug and alcohol testing that we do all new full-time hires, and the drug testing we do for all part-time hires, including seasonal and non-seasonal employees. So this is, again, we had about 25 more hires last year than we did the year before, and this accounts for the difference in cost,
Okay.
primarily.
Questions from Margaret?
Do we do criminal background?
We do not do
You
criminal.
don't, huh?
We do not do criminal. We do a government background check. We have a governmental agency that does a background check for us, but it's not a direct criminal.
I mean, so you're not worried about fraud or anything else?
In this budget, certainly if someone is going to be handling money, we would be doing a credit check. Someone who works in finance, someone who works in the tax department. But we would not be doing a general credit check, for example, that was some catch fraud or something like that.
Okay, questions on this $6,540?
Move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff, seconded by Pam, I think, right?
Yep.
Additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Harry. And the second one is for the fire.
That's correct, the fire contract that was approved. This is basically, for this year only, a 2.5% increase, which of course we don't budget for before the new year, it's budgeted after. That's what the main cost involved here. It was a good contract, I believe it's a good contract for the town, a good contract for the firefighters also.
Okay, thank you on that, Margaret. Questions from Margaret on the fire contingency transfer to fund the approved union contract?
I move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff,
Second.
second by Charlie. Their discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you.
Take care. Okay, item number 7 is to consider and if appropriate, approve a request from the fire chief to appropriate an additional $210,000 to the fiscal 22 apparatus sinking fund as follows: from contingency $60,000, from interest, for debt service interest $46,000, and for debt service interest on schools $104,000, for a total of $210,000. And transferring that out through to Fund 700, the capital fund, in order to set up the appropriation. Chief, welcome.
Thank you. So we didn't intend to actually place an order for a new piece of apparatus until at earliest next year. However, all of the latest numbers we're getting from our trade associations, our internal communications with varying neighboring departments who have ordered vehicles, and you know, just the news and stuff we're getting, along with working with various vendors, that over the last 2 years there's been about a 27% increase overall in apparatus, and it's also pushing the delivery dates out 2 to 3 years. So we're trying to get ahead of it because we know that there's a 7% increase coming up in November. So I had approached the first selectman and the finance director to see if they would support me in my endeavor to ask you for an appropriation in this year so that we could place the order. We currently have the soliciting bids are out. We haven't received them back yet. And, you know, knowing that the apparatus isn't going to be delivered for 2 to 3 years, that's when the money would actually leave the account, but of course we can't place an order without the appropriation. It's fully supported unanimously by the board as well. But we, certainly thank Finance Director for coming up with a way to assist with the financing, seeing how we're in the middle of the budget here.
He is very creative at
Isn't
times.
At times.
And we're lucky we have him, for sure. Okay, so the worksheet that I think Jim put together on with your cooperation shows that the closing balance for fiscal '22 was $541,000, and So that would include the 210,000
Yeah.
that we would consider tonight. And then that would, along with the 375,000 that's in this current budget, would enable you to have 916,000 available, and you're estimating around 900 grand for the engine 7, which is your.
Yeah, so engine 7 is the oldest engine that we're going to be replacing, but it's actually going to be engine 1, and then that one will get moved back to become the spare, and we're starting the process now of moving, you know, engine 1's the busiest engine because it's the career engine, and it truly gets the most mileage, the most use. We went through a cycle where we had purchased volunteer pieces, new, which we hadn't done previously. And now we're getting back into the cycle of purchasing an engine 1 and then moving it back to replace the slower units that have less mileage on it. So engine 7 is the actual engine that's getting replaced, but
Right.
It's really engine 1.
Right, so it's a 2005 engine 7.
Yes.
And where is that now, engine 7?
Engine 7 is here at headquarters as the spare piece. It's got 135,000 miles, and the intended purpose after the new one comes in is to move and replace engine 9, which is down in Indian Neck, which is a 2000, I believe.
Yeah, it's a 2001 is what it says here, yeah. Okay.
Question, Joe. So Chief, any engines getting traded in with this transaction? Like, is engine 9 going to get traded out?
Engine 9 will get either traded out or probably more placed out to auction.
Right. Is that what we're doing with the old engine 5?
The old engine 5 was already disposed of, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Chief, you know, the engine's going to be about 900,000.
The actual quote that we've got from one of the vendors who's we've been working closest with, of course, we did place it out to bid. We haven't gotten the bids back yet. Was estimated to be around $885,000.
What percentage do you have to put with the order?
Usually it's a 20%.
At 20? Okay. No,
If I remember correctly, but I got to get the bids back to see what they're.
Okay. No, I just wondered how much.
It should also be noted that communities that place previous orders with a certain vendor, that vendor's soliciting each community that they have orders placed with for about $200,000 each. Otherwise, they're going to not be able to fulfill the orders and go bankrupt. So the industry's a little stressed right now. We don't anticipate that with this, but I think it's worth mentioning that, you know, part of the reason we're trying to get the, you know, the order in is because we just don't know what's happening right now.
But does the manufacturer ask for a step up in the first year, second year, and then final payment, or?
The article that I read is they went and physically asked each community that they have for an additional 200,000 because
Really?
that's how they just lowballed it so much that with the supply chain and inflationary pressures, they can't afford to exist and complete
Okay.
the orders without the extra money.
Thanks.
So to follow up on that, when you provide the 20% or whatever that, what's the protection to the town that they will?
They have a bond that
They have a bond, a
yeah.
performance bond?
Yeah. It's included in the bid. They have to provide a performance bond.
And Jamie, you're supportive of this?
Yes.
Additional questions on this?
Good.
I'll move the
I'll move it.
allocation.
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
So it's been moved by Victor and seconded by Charlie. Additional discussion. Harry, got any questions?
No, I'm fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Good luck.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care. Okay, next is to consider and if appropriate, approve an appropriation for fiscal '23 from the Fiscal Resiliency Fund to conduct a climate resilience engineering evaluation of the wastewater treatment plant collection system and approve the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the RTM an appropriation of $75,000 in the Coastal Resiliency Fund. The appropriation will be funded through an appropriation from fund balance, and the actual amount is $75,000 according to Mr. Finch. So it'll be increase in fund balance transfer $75,000 and into consulting services of $75,000. And, okay, welcome, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good.
It's Paul, isn't it?
Paul here.
Sure. Would you like to expand on this?
Well, so the Coastal Vulnerability Working Group has been working at the First Selectman's direction for almost 2 years, over 2 years. And our study has focused on available documents that the town had previously acquired regarding flood hazard mitigation townwide. Our responsibility was to mine that information to identify tasks that would benefit the community to increase climate resilience for municipal infrastructure. As we've looked into that information, one of the items that seems to be extremely useful to the majority of residents would be improving the resiliency of the wastewater treatment plant. And so we've made an effort to reach out to the Water Pollution Control Authority and worked with a subgroup to develop a document, which would be a request for proposals for engineering services to evaluate the flood risk to the treatment plant and the collection systems throughout town. This would be the first step in identifying measures to improve or flood-proof the treatment plant in the event of sea level rise. So looking at it in a phased fashion, our original intention is to commission an engineering firm to evaluate inundation prevention and mitigation measures for the infrastructure components of the complete wastewater collection system, and determination of the climate vulnerability of the plant and the system under a variety of potential inundation conditions would be the initial step in the planning stage of a comprehensive project. So our task would be to look at the treatment plant and the pumping stations, find out what the elevation and risk, the elevation of certain components, pumps, panels, motors, monitoring systems, evaluate their elevations and their risk of flooding, and look at the knock-on effects of flooding under sea level rise conditions, capture that information, and then use that to develop another study to design measures that would potentially mitigate the risk of flooding under sea level rise conditions. The third step would be actually to take that design, go out to bid, and modify the actual physical components. This is really the first step to identify the level of risk throughout the system.
Sounds expensive.
Overall, I would think we're in the several $1 million to modify the plant. The town engineer and the assistant town engineer went to Fairfield's treatment plant on the 15th, I believe. They completed a task at their treatment plant. There are a number of ways that flood proofing can occur. I think some measure was used at the community house, which is in a floodplain. You know, this is a task that is preventative in its nature, as opposed to being reactive to a flood condition. The consideration would be to get out in front of it, find out what the risk is, find out what the floodproofing cost would be. If the floodproofing cost is such that we can't afford it, we should probably know about that and make a considered decision that we don't want to floodproof. So the first step is to find out how much of the system is vulnerable under a variety of flood scenarios, including regular daily high tide modifications that are coming, storm conditions, and then extreme storm conditions.
Victor?
Paul, have you looked into the Inflation Reduction Act? There's supposed to be billions of dollars reserved for this sort of thing.
So we have, with consideration and discussion with Director Finch. The ARPA funds that the town obtained have a specific designation for wastewater treatment plant resiliency design and construction.
Perfect.
We talked about using ARPA funds for this task. The alternative suggestion is to tap into the town of Brantford Coastal Resiliency Fund, which really has not been dipped into, to the best of my knowledge.
No, it hasn't.
To the extent that the fund was created X number of years ago. After the fund was created, the question arose, what will that fund be for? How will it be controlled? What will it be used for? The Coastal Vulnerability Working Group, to some degree, was formed to consider the proper use of those funds. We have not requested use of a single penny of that money since we came into existence prior to COVID. This is the first time that we've suggested using CRF money. And one aspect of the suggestion is to demonstrate that the fund is going to be used for its intended purpose. The potential use of ARPA funds continues to remain, continues to exist. Our thought now is that demonstrating the use of CRF on a project like this to our residents for a task that would benefit a significant number of residents would be a good use of the funds and an initial first step in the use of the funds.
Okay, but, you mentioned the Arbor Funds, which was
Yes.
a COVID reaction, right?
Yes.
So there's the new, that was just passed, into law only a month or so ago.
Well, since ARPA, there was also the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah.
So there will be funds available.
Yeah, and I think that's, go ahead.
Got a question, Victor?
No, I think Jamie's responding.
Yeah, I was just to follow up on that. I mean, I think we established, and just going back to Paul's comment about a number of town residents would benefit from this. Well, you can make the argument that our entire town, given the fact, the importance of our wastewater, not only the collection system, but the plant has on really our economy, our environment, and public health. It really is a critical asset to the entire town. To utilize, I think what Paul was saying, he initially came and suggested perhaps utilizing ARPA dollars to fund this first study. We thought, perhaps this is a better candidate to utilize the Coastal Resiliency Fund, utilize the dollars from that to do this first part. But to your question, Victor, regarding the Inflation Reduction Act, certainly there's significant dollars. And Brantford is positioning itself well with all the measures that we have, not only the study, but establishing the fund. You may recall a couple of years ago, the Coastal Resiliency Fund, that would be another tool that the town would have to leverage additional dollars. I mean, there's the Inflation Reduction Act, there's the Storm Act, there's a number of the Infrastructure Act, a number of potential funding sources, and we would utilize, and we're positioning ourselves to leverage those dollars to put ourselves in a very competitive position by doing this work to go after those dollars. So that is our intention.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Jamie.
Charlie?
Paul, are there other solutions other than a big seawall?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, are you familiar with the other alternatives?
I'm marginally familiar with them, so I have no claims to expertise. However, I've spent time, on this working.
Yeah, I'm kind of anxious to see what the
exposed to
result is, because I just visualize a huge seawall.
So there are the two fundamental concepts are wet flood proofing and dry flood proofing. So in dry flood proofing, you would build the opposite of a moat around your structure, and there are a number of ways that could be done, say for example with a permanent concrete wall, or devices that are on hinges that can flip up that either manually or in an automated fashion to create a dry island within a flooded area. Alternatively, there's wet flood proofing, in which case components and equipment are modified in their position so that the structure may submerge, but the function of the structure is retained. I don't know which way we would go, and a study from an engineering company that has gained expertise in climate resiliency is kind of what we would need. You know, I know how to drive a car, but I'm not a traffic engineer. So similar to, similar kind of thinking. We can see what happens in a flood, but we are not the specific engineers all the time.
Now, with regards to the pump stations,
yes,
you'd have to either, again, wet or dry type of improvements that would either raise them above the potential level or deal with them.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I will give massive amount of credit to Peter Hensel, who has volunteered a significant amount of time and determined the elevation of all of the pump stations in town and provided that to the town engineer and plant manager as an important part of the database that the Coastal Vulnerability Working Group has assembled. Again, you could flood-proof the entire system, or you could flood-proof the plant itself such that when the floodwaters recede, at least the plant still works.
Right.
The value of the pumping stations and the generators that are present at the pumping stations and the electrical panels and switchgear that are present is significant. So that's ultimately a question of what we how deep we would choose to go.
Now, years ago, they did a big project on the infiltration and the manholes and that sort of thing. How does that impact this? Is that a factor as well?
Well, I can't say that I can't say that I know.
Is that what I was the impact of pumping stations?
Yeah, I mean, the town has undertaken a number of measures or implemented a number of measures to try to control I&I at our various locations, and has done some saying is even at the pump stations in installing generators, raising equipment to be above flood. I think this is rather taking a very comprehensive look at the entire system and really developing a plan rather than as you said, being as mentioned, being proactive, and then rather than identifying these little areas where we're vulnerable and trying to take small steps and address it at those specific areas, right? So this is really evaluating our entire system.
The whole system. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Charlie, you got one question?
This sounds similar to what we did at the fire department or the fire station in Indian Neck, right? Didn't we do a wet solution there?
I don't know exactly what was done there, but it was a consideration in design. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a wet solution where the flood water would come in, recede, everything is protected. The community house is dry. I mean, we have flood panels that we can install within an hour to keep that building dry inside.
Thanks.
This study then will give us all the alternatives?
Not necessarily. I mean, this study we're thinking of it in terms of a survey. So we need to find out specifically emphasizing the treatment plant and then potentially expanding out to the pump stations, but we need to use our database of system components and rank the components in terms of their risk. And then once we've prioritized risk, we could look at design alternatives to mitigate that risk. Once we have the design, we would then estimate cost.
That's good. Thank you. Pam, you got any questions?
No, I was just curious that when we constructed, I don't know how old the system is, was any of this taken into consideration since we are a coastal community when it was built? Do we have?
Well, A new generator was installed within the past 2 years, and that's above nominal flood elevation. But nominal flood elevation is increasing.
Harry, you got any questions?
I'm all set on it.
I'll move this, Joe.
Been moved by Victor,
A second.
seconded by Jeff. Any additional discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Next is number 9, to consider and if appropriate, approve a transfer request from the finance director for the following. From contingency, this is for fiscal '22, from contingency 39,000, transfer out to fund 700, 39,000. And within fund 700, transfer into increase the revenue side by 39,000 and the appropriation of Clear Government Budgeting Solutions, 39,000. And this is to fund the request from the finance director for the Clear Government Budgeting application that we spoke of previously, and I believe some of the board members had a demo on today. Jim, would you like to expand on this?
Sure, I won't belabor because many of you did participate in a recording is made available for your viewing for those who weren't able to do it. Essentially, Catherine and I were looking at this program probably about a year ago, and a few months back we were looking at implementing the capital side of this system, and it is a web-based system in which data is managed and collected through the web, one central point, and then it does a number of things. It collects the data, you use it for budgeting, you use it for actual capital budgeting, and you use it to create this digital budget book. Originally, we were going to take a small step by trying it with capital. We had a demo with department heads, and Jamie had thought that this would actually be good for us to implement the full suite of this. And in order to do this sooner, so we can try to implement it in the next budget cycle, we're asking for money sort of off our budget cycle. And so this is what this request is for. If you were to approve it and the RTM were to approve it, and the Board of Selectmen, then it would be something that we could probably start at the earliest in November, but that would give us some time before we begin our budget cycle in late February.
Okay, thanks. Questions from the board? For those who participated in the demonstration, I think it's a pretty robust type of application that will assist not only the finance department, but I think and department heads, but also some transparency with regards to the general public. Charlie, you got a question?
Jim, is it 39 for all 4 modules?
Yeah, it's for the whole. It's for the whole package.
Okay. No, it covers it.
Jamie, you have any comments on this?
No, I mean, I think Jim did a good job summing it up. We had the presentation. I know some of you have. I just think it's something that would really benefit the process. The finance department, the board, as well as the public, as you mentioned, Joe, through the transparency aspect.
Thank you.
I'll move it, Joe. I was
Moved.
quite impressed with the demonstration.
I'll second it.
Moved by Victor, seconded by Jeff. Discussion. Harry, you got any questions? Discussion?
All set, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Good luck, you and Catherine. I know Catherine's done a lot of background on it too, so appreciate that, all that hard work going into this. Okay, next is to consider, number 10, consider and if appropriate, approve the recommendation to the finance director regarding the capital projects ordinance. And Jim has provided a cover letter with regards to the new ordinance that was put in place with regards to unspent capital project monies, and also provided a worksheet with proposed compliance with regards to that ordinance. Jim, would you like to expand on that?
Sure. As the board may recall, last February, we had done a presentation, gave a brief overview of an ordinance passed by the representative town meeting, looking at capital balances and whether there should be some kind of language or requirement that, with regard to these funds lapsing or to have them reviewed on a regular basis. I had reached out to a number of communities, and as one might expect, some folks had ordinance, some folks didn't, and so we thought it was a good idea to at least impart some kind of process on this, because after all, a lot of this stuff ends up over the years taking up space in our finance system, and we have a lot of projects with similar items. The challenge for us, however, was okay, so how do we implement this? And there was actually two different types of requirements. So there's typically the pay-as-you-go capital project, and then those projects that are in funds which could be bonded. And so the ordinance addressed that. If it was a bonded project and it was more than, you take the fiscal year plus 6, and if there was no activity, then that would be something that would need it to be reviewed. If that project got closed out, then the dollars could go back into the general fund and pay debt service. And of course, you could always redesignate them for another purpose. The capital projects funds, the pay-as-you-go projects, were on a much shorter lifespan, so that was the fiscal year plus 2. And so, so we were looking at projects that were basically authorized for fiscal year 20. And as you know, the fiscal year starts in July, so that really gives them 3 years plus another 3 months. The other challenge was, well, what is the mechanics of implementing this? And we were very much aware that this is the first year, so this is kind of our main voyage, and we're going to try and approach, and if that works, we'll try to duplicate it in other years. The other aspect of this, I've had some brief emails back and forth over the last month or so, and more recently, is that the Board of Ed is going to, I believe, be coming to your board at the next meeting with their projects. Because as my letter states, that rather than having each department come to you with a request, we thought it was a more manageable process for the first selectman and myself to present a list to you. And what might be an easy way of doing this is if you were to approve, if you look at these projects, which we can briefly walk through, if you approve the list for each fund, then we make sure that the attachments are part of the minutes, and that should faithfully capture the recommendations. So I'm going to do these in fund order, starting with Fund 700, which is the starting with the town clerk vault. Now, as you know, that this has been an item that's been appropriated for a variety of years, and there's been a series of discussions internally over the years about what should be done to the vault, how it should be done, and when it should be done. And I think that in listening to the prior presentations and conversations that Jamie, Lisa, and myself had this afternoon, is you just heard a request for $75,000 out of the Coastal Resiliency Fund to assess the vulnerabilities of the treatment plant. And I think if you take that approach as it relates to the vault, well, what are the vulnerabilities with the vault? Okay, is there a storage vulnerability? Are the systems in there, whether shelving system space, adequate to meet, to meet the future needs? Is there a vulnerability in terms of water? In other words, if a sprinkler system went off and there was water in the vault, what sort of vulnerabilities are there? And of course, there's always the vulnerability of potentially fire. So I think that one of the things that we talked about, which would actually clean up these appropriations, is where you see town clerk vault upgrades, is we're talking about at the next meeting, basically combine those into one, and then Jamie and Lisa can actually proceed with an approach there. So that was one of the things, and it also helps clean up some of these balances. And one of the things that we would most likely do, which I think is a strategy that's been perfected by the rec department, is when they combine some of their projects, they actually assign they do it into a new fiscal year project. Now, why is that significant? It's because the formula pursuant to the ordinance works off of a project year. So that would basically, in effect, extend it. So when you see, you're going to see a couple different types of recommendations to do a transfer and combine. You're going to see extend the project, and that's if we think that something could be happening within the next year. There are some that we're recommending that in discussions with the department that aren't required anymore, and in those cases we would close them. So if you're looking at Fund 700, you'll see that those two projects at the police department are extended. The project at the police department is extending it for the carpet, the town hall front steps. We want to extend because there's always work being done on those. The town hall roof and gutters, we would actually close that, so those dollars would then come back to the general fund. The transfer station and some of the other town building and the energy saving projects, we would basically transfer and combine with other similar projects of a different year. Same with like the HVAC and the vehicles. So we would extend the vehicles. At the time, I think they were looking to get a used vehicle and combine it with some other appropriations, but as you know, the car prices are very high now. We have some small balances, with our tax system and Munis. Those go back to when the new system was upgraded. Catherine occasionally will need some kind of work.
So that's an 08?
Yeah.
So that project number is the reference to the fiscal year?
Correct. Yep.
Got it.
Yep. And then the online permitting software, I did speak with the building inspector and the IT director, and they've asked that that one be extended. Body cameras and the phone system, those are small balances, and we would anticipate that those would get used up in the next year. And as you can see, that there's activity there. Those vehicle accounts at the animal shelter, we would probably just combine those. We know that the animal shelter does use vehicles, but there's not a lot you could purchase there, so we would probably we're looking to combine that. The center decorative lights, as you know, there's a main large project on Main Street. Involves a whole host of activities, and we know that everything's getting more expensive. And while it was very tempting, to close that, you can go either way. So, well, maybe you close it because we're doing this big project, but on the other hand, maybe we should leave it open because we're doing a big project, and those funds may be of value by keeping them there. Jamie had indicated in one of our meetings the past week or today that that the town parking lots, that money is going to be used very soon because there's some projects in the pipeline. When you start looking at the sewer system and the manhole covers, as I've said multiple times, it's hard to say that we're spending too much money on sewers, and so we would look to do some transfer and combining there. Same with the transfer station. The Rose Hill project, that one, is still something that, engineering is working on different configurations with that.
That's a 2012 project?
Yeah. Right, I mean, they were looking at also, that's the...
Yeah,
the one
well, that
we
was,
talked about expanding.
because that was part of it was going to be done at the same time. There was a development that was going to occur. That property has since changed hands, I think, a couple times. But so that was really what delayed that from moving forward, was because the developer at the time, and there was part of the sewer use agreement that was in place. It was leveraging the work that the developer was going to do to offset some of our costs.
Right, got it. Okay, thanks, Jim.
And then the GIS database, and that has a negative balance, but there's also an encumbrance there. So if there's an open encumbrance, we still want to keep that project going. The Riverview project is something that would actually close out. The Pisgah Brook improvements, there's only a small balance, so we would extend that. And Rich Shanahan is fairly active in terms of the work that they do there. So I would think that between the encumbrance that's outstanding and the 250, that they can make that go away. Natural resource inventory is a victim of its own project code, because that was when we at the Board of Finance had approved 10,000 in March a couple of years back, and then recently an additional 20,000. The RTM reduced it to 10,000, but that's still a project that it's envisioned that at some point they're going to do the inventory within the next year. So that one would make sense to simply extend it. Getting into the next fund, 720. First item is the building improvements at the exterior to the senior center. That's the Canoe Brook Senior Center. So that's something we would be looking to close. The projects at the police station, there's two projects there. As you know from about a year or so ago, when we had put money to have a evaluation or study done at the police station for their future needs, we anticipate that there's going to be money spent at that facility. So we would come back to you and transfer and combine that with a newer police appropriation for it. We most likely would add it to the one that you guys created a year ago, last March. The front hall steps maintenance, that's something we would extend. Those steps, there's always a work that's, like I said, there's items that are being done there. And you may have noticed even we're trying to direct the traffic flow there a little bit too. You might have noticed if you've been to Town Hall, there's been some planters there and other things. So the front steps are always seem to be a challenge for us, those granite steps. The generator installation, Town Hall doesn't have a backup generator. Jamie could probably speak to more of the details on that. And then the last two ones on the transfer station, there's a lot of projects there, and we're thinking of basically coming back with a recommendation to combine those transfer stations into kind of one project and make that a little easier. The Fund 730, the infrastructure enhancement project, there's some small balances from a drainage project which we would probably redesignate. So I would, in all likelihood, reach out to bond counsel and come up with a bond reauthorization there or an amendment. Same with the Arbor Street Culvert project. That also was a bonded project, although there was some state money involved in that as well. And then the Linden Avenue Shoreline, we were thinking of closing it, but again, because you have a purchase order outstanding, that's the $13,871 requisition. We're thinking of basically keeping that open for another year. Now, you may ask about the purchase orders on the Harbor Street Culvert. We did talk to the town engineer today, and he was saying we could close those out. So, close out the purchase order. So, again, that's sort of one way we discussed trying to distill a lot of projects into sort of 3 recommendations. You're certainly not obligated to follow these recommendations. Catherine has it on the laptop, so if you were to change any of these recommendations, then we would have to
adjust accordingly. So, number one, I just want to compliment you and Catherine on putting this together. It's comprehensive, and it's in compliance with the ordinance, but I think it's good to have these in front of us, and so it's a good start. I mean, my thought is to defer to you and your office and the first selectman on these at this point in time, knowing that this also, our recommendation goes to the RTM, and so my question would be if we say, yeah, this is good, we'll take your recommendations, yours and Jamie's recommendations on these, and the RTM chooses to pick one or two that they don't approve, then that would revert to fund balance. Is that the way I'd interpret it?
I believe that is correct.
Okay. So the majority, other than maybe a little over 100,000 or so, would be closed out. The rest would either be combined or designated or completed. And if not, then this is an annual review that would come back to us?
Yeah, so for example, next year, the projects of, say, 21 would be coming back.
They'd be added on here.
They'd be added.
The 2012s would be off.
Yeah, and then what's going to happen is you're going to, yeah, I mean, unless we extend it 2012, then you got to extend it again. But yeah, in the 08s, right? But basically the other thing too, which the ordinance doesn't address, but I think there's sort of a universal understanding is that, you know, if the funds came from a sewer fund, it would go back to a sewer fund. Right. I mean, I don't think the ordinance contemplated all of those scenarios, but I think the general rule is, you know, if it's a 700,
go back to the source.
Yeah, if it's a 700 fund, because that's pay-as-you-go operating, it goes back to the general fund. If it's a, you know, if it comes out of the sewer fund, it should go back to the sewer fund. If it's bonded and it comes back, well, then the position we take there is that it's used with all dollars being fungible to cover the debt service. So that's how we kind of looked at it. Yeah.
That's good. This is questions from Jim on this
Yeah, you know, it would help me if I knew what the total was for the extend ones. You know what I mean?
Can I tell you?
Have a comment.
Can I tell you tomorrow?
Huh?
Can I tell you tomorrow?
Well, most of it is
no,
either
but there are
extend-
comments for extend and.
Well, I think it's all combined. It's all extended to some extent because it's either a transfer and combine, which is essentially an extend, and then you just got extend in its own original format, and then you've got close, and the only thing that closed is you got 98 grand up top, and you've got some other small amounts. So basically everything but 100,000 is being extended or combined and lives on. Fair enough?
I thought there was some going back to the general fund.
Yeah, the 98,000.
The 98,000.
We'll go back.
So that's, again, this is the first shot to put everything out in a report per the ordinance, and it's a good look for not only the board to look at, because, you know, a lot of these are somewhat, not buried, but they're combined in the annual report. You don't really see the detail of it unless you specifically look for it or ask for it. So, but as I mentioned, the RTM gets a review of this as well, and if they don't choose to follow the same recommendation that we provided, then it would revert to its one of its original sources.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that it's, you know, it's getting looked at. It's getting, and that's the thing.
It's getting scrutiny, and then again to say if you either put a plan together in order to spend it. If not, then it should come back. Questions? Harry, Harry, have any questions?
No, sir.
So, I think, Victor?
I'll move to approve the list to recommend.
Okay, so we're approving the list and recommending it to the RTM for their purview as well.
I'll move it.
I'll second that.
Moved by Victor, and we'll give Harry the second on that one. Additional discussion, questions from Jamie or Jim or Catherine? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thanks, Jim and Catherine. Number 11 is to consider and if appropriate approve appropriation from the Arbor Fund in fiscal '23 and approve the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Finance recommends to the RTM an increase in the ARPA fund budget from $2,232,000 to $2,327,000. This fiscal '23 appropriation will be used to fund a subsidy for the Brantford Arts and Cultural Alliance and the Shoreline Chamber of Commerce, and will be funded through an appropriation from the Arbor Funds. The motion would increase the fund balance transfer in of $95,000 and identify the two appropriations, BACA at $70,000 and Shoreline Chamber of Commerce at $25,000. We previously had presentations with regards to those requests, and Jim, I'll ask you and Jamie to just briefly provide some additional information.
Sure. I guess I can, and Jim can follow up if he has anything to add. I think, the last meeting or previous meeting, I know the board had discussed in terms of, allocating how these dollars will be allocated, the ARPA dollars, and I think there was some discussion at that point, perhaps, again, although not yet determined, but somewhere in the area about 95% would be used for general government services. And the remaining 5% we would look to, deploy perhaps to some outside agencies. I think the approach we were taking here is looking at these two requests. The one from BACA, which is the Brantford Arts and Cultural Alliance, and I know you heard a presentation. I believe there's some members here from that organization if you'd have some additional questions. But they were looking for support in the area of $70,000 to essentially support the organization so they can further, I'm going to say establish themselves, but set themselves on a way to be more sustainable and grow some future programs and services that they provide in the community. I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence at this point that they do provide benefit to the community, both the business community as well as the residents, and have a tourism impact as well on our town. The other request was with the Shoreline Chamber. They have a business coaching program. They've asked each member town for a contribution of $25,000 to begin that program. To be clear, the $25,000 would be dedicated for businesses and not limited to chamber businesses, but open to the full business community, and they would solicit applications to assist those businesses that may have been impacted hard through COVID and even struggling just coming out of the pandemic. So, the approach that we were looking at is these are, as you know, we do dedicate dollars towards economic development. We feel that these two programs, BACA and Shoreline Community, Shoreline Chamber, kind of fit within the economic development of our town. Therefore, we feel that this would fall under that general government services request.
Thanks, Jamie.
Again, we do have D. Jacobs here as well from the Shoreline Chamber if you have any specific questions regarding that ask.
Okay, why don't we start with the chamber and the $25,000, and Dee, would you like to just come up for a minute, if you would? So the board may have some questions with regards to this transfer request. Charlie, you have any questions?
Is this a one-year set of request, or do you think this is going to be ongoing?
What we expect is that the rate that we're experiencing in another town, it will probably be a 12 to 18 month usage of those funds. Those funds specifically allow us to pay stipends to people who are in the consulting coaching arena so that we have some control over the process. A little bit of the funds are used for marketing and administrating the program through the chamber, but the vast majority allows us to pursue 28 engagements, we figure, over that 12 to 18-month period in alignment with the spending policies of ARPA.
Okay, now will the money, this 25, will it stay in the town of Brantford, or will it be spread out over the shoreline?
The reason we are pursuing this in an individual town is solely to dedicate those dollars to members, to businesses, whether they're individuals, doesn't matter what kind of industry they are. If they're looking for some help because they're struggling or want an outside look when they are trying to spend some limited dollars on an approach to get a second set of eyes at it, only in Brantford.
Okay.
And we have a very separate tracking system set up.
Now, would this apply only to chamber members, or would it be the broader business community?
The reason we're seeking funds from the town's ARPA funds is because I can only provide services to my members that are funded from my members. The reason we're seeking the ARPA funds, it allows us to provide services to all non-members if we so choose, or any combination.
Thank you. Commissioner Charlie?
Listen, does that mean that the chamber members couldn't benefit from this?
Chamber members could. Any business in Brantford can.
Okay, but I thought you said the ARPA funds were to spread it to the non-members.
Let me clarify. If I tried to fund it through my own budget, it's funds received from members, I could only spend it on members.
Right.
The reason I sought outside dollars is that allowed us to open up to a larger quantity of businesses. And again, our focus is on helping economic development per our mission.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other questions for Dee?
Good, Joe.
Thank you. Thanks. And I'd ask Frank, would you like to come up for?
I'm going to invite people to come up with them.
So we were provided with a BACA projected annual budget that Jim provided to us, and that the question I think we have several questions. One is whether or not this is thought as an ongoing subsidy, and secondly, at some point in time, do you anticipate net profit from your activities?
These are projected numbers, obviously. We're not projecting an increase in sales next year because we're beginning to realize a decline the last several months, I think, based on the economic situation. So our goal is to increase sales through better advertising, better promotion, bringing people into the gallery for the purpose of making purchases. And that's part of what our budget reflects, is efforts on our part, to do better outreach and marketing and providing people with more information and giving them more opportunities to come to visit the gallery and hopefully make purchases. So our goal, obviously, is to reduce that deficit every year. On the other hand, the rent has a 4% escalation every year. That's already built into the lease. So we have to accommodate that. That's a given. And people were talking about Eversource and energy and all that. And right now, we have no reason to believe that energy costs will be reduced, but probably increase. So it's, our challenge is to maintain that venue and accommodate its high costs, which is the rent and the utilities. So we have plans in place. We have fundraisers. We just did a fundraiser a little over a week ago. We are now part of the Brantford Festival, so that will provide us with a regular source of additional income. So we don't want to overestimate what our fundraising capacity is, so we think we can probably raise more funds than that, but we want to be cautious.
Thanks, Frank. Questions from the board?
Yeah, Frank, it looks like on the 3-year projection here, they're all negative, for the year end. And so we're going to fund the first 2 negative years. But the 3rd year, with all these projections that you're planning on, why are you still in the hole? Why are you still 50,000 short? Why not more positive?
I think it just, again, reflects the additional cost of the rent going up 4% each year, compounded. So the 3rd year is 4% of an additional 4, an additional 4 of what we're paying now. And again, these are just estimates. We could have, overestimated things and had a lower number.
No, but it looks like you're going to be. It looks like you're coming back in the 3rd year, though.
Pardon?
It looks like you're coming back in the 3rd year for some more funds.
Well, not necessarily. We have, we hope to continue to seek outside funds from other sources. We have already gotten grants. That's not reflected here. The fundraising is, a separate function. Again, I think we were just maybe being overly cautious with this, not wanting to overestimate or underestimate the cost. For instance, we have our income from gallery sales we're not increasing that in the 3rd year, and our goal would be to have that increase because of the work we're going to do in year 1 and year 2. That we hope that will be reflected in the 3rd year with an increased sales. And the gallery rental, we continue to seek opportunities to get more rental income from the space. So perhaps we underestimated all of those factors in favor of caution, but I think the 3rd year our goal is to dramatically reduce that number.
Frank, there's that line item that's artist. Could you just expand on what that is?
I'm sorry?
There's a line item that says artist.
Yes, that's the payments that we make to the artists. So we collect 25% of the sales. 75% is paid to the artists.
Okay. So this is gross salaries, gross sales, and then a portion that gets...
Yeah, so our revenue is 90,000, but we don't keep 90,000.
Got it.
We keep 25%.
That's the, you keep the 25%, is it?
Right.
Got it, okay. The net is 25%. Questions or comments?
Yes, Joe. Frank, what kind of grant dollars have you received?
I'm sorry?
What kind of grant dollars have you received and how much? They're not reflected here.
This year we received about $25,000 in grants from the state of Connecticut, New Haven Arts Council, the New Haven Community Foundation.
So that's something you see as ongoing?
We just received a small grant from the Brantford Community Foundation.
Our hope, Jeff, is with this money, this will give us some breathing room to work on strategic plans, to work on, we just formed a new events committee. We're going to meet in November. We're going to outline next year. It also gives us time to look at different options, to research grants, to give us time to do strategic planning. How can we increase our revenue? This money from the town will give us that opportunity, because right now we're going from one event to another to fundraise because we want to keep the gallery open. We're bringing people downtown. We have Karen Braganese here from Splash, Mark
I really
Massaro.
would like Karen and Mark to speak if they may, because I think they can attest to the claim that we tried to make, which is that we have created an environment in the gallery that has supported economic development in the business community downtown. Karen is a business owner on Main Street, and Mark is an artist, but also is a prior of the commercial arts school.
Okay, so Mary, thanks for those comments. Let me hear from Karen.
I mean, since the gallery has opened, it has been truly, it gives us that feeling that we're in Martha's Vineyard at times. You know, it's an aspect to the retail community that's also has a museum quality. I have benefited. It has increased foot traffic. I know that people are now getting off their boats and coming to the center of town, which I have, and all the time I knew the farmers had the pharmacy, I never heard that. You know, people are actually viewing this as a tourist area as opposed to just the center of town.
Yeah, you had a nice weekend last weekend with the Doors.
Oh, yeah, I mean, and it's beautiful, it's fun, everybody gets involved, it's all walks of life, it's the service clubs come in, the schools come in. I mean, it includes everybody, it doesn't just benefit Main Street.
Sure.
You know, it does include a lot of people.
Thank you.
To speak to the importance of this gallery, I want to preface it with this. I've been a working professional artist and a teacher for 50 years. I established both of those careers as a Brantford resident. So I've seen an awful lot over the last 5 decades of the very strong art community in Brantford. I don't think people are aware of how many professional artists live in Brantford who have tried to establish some sort of presence through the Brantford Art League and various other endeavors to establish something for the community to show how much creative talent there is in this town. The Baca Gallery, I think, has extraordinary potential to bring a unique aspect to the town of Brantford. Because of its size, right off the bat, it establishes something right there that in being the largest gallery on the coastline. From here all the way up to O-Line, there are no galleries the size of the Baca Gallery, so right there that gives it a distinction. The second is that it gives, finally, after so many years, decades, the professionals that live in this area a venue to exhibit and sell their work. And probably most importantly is that as a regular exhibitor at the facility, there are always new exhibits and there are receptions for these shows. And I attend every single one of them. And if you have attended, been to any of these, you know that they are always packed. That's telling you that the community wants this. And because of the size of the facility, I look at it as almost like an anchor store of a mall. You go to this popular store, and then you patronize the other businesses in the mall. Because of the size of this gallery in the center of Brantford, it's an opportunity for other businesses to thrive as a result of it. I've had, on several occasions, I've had people ask me, they're in the exhibit, compliment it, and say, hey, is there any place good to eat around here? Right there, that's telling you that they're coming into town, they're seeing the exhibit, now they're looking for a place to eat. I would be thrilled to see other types of retail come into Brantford connected to the gallery as far as being fine craft and art, jewelry, weavers, woodworkers, you know, that type of thing, and which would make Brantford a very unique retail area to visit. It reminds me, if some of you may be old enough to remember, when I moved to Brantford, there was a place on Route 1 called Bittersweet Farms. It was a large barn sort of structure facility that had galleries in it, fine craft, antique dealers, and it was always crowded with people. They would come from various areas of the state to go to Bittersweet Farms because of this unique facility that was in Branford, where they could see art. by Art. So I think that this is something that really needs to stay alive in Brantford, because I think it can develop into something that would make and change the entire retail perception of the center of Brantford.
Thank you. Thanks. And Frank, question, the lease that you've signed, how long is that for?
It's a 5-year lease, renewable every year. So we, our lease is through March.
I think the board is generally quite supportive of this. I think it's new territory for us. That's why we kind of, really try to ask as many questions as possible, and as to where, we want you to be successful. We're just a little conservative with regards to future requests for funding. But that said, Jamie, you had some comments you wanted to comment?
Well, just to kind of follow up on a couple, I think, from questions and comments that I heard from this discussion. I think, Charlie's point about the looking at the third year, the projection for the third year, and they're still running a deficit. I think the request for the initial request for the first year's 70,000. I believe that 70,000 will, looking at what was projected here, will close the gap for this 2022 deficit, as well as fill the gap for the proposed budget for 2023. You have 29,000 for this year, 49,000 for 2023. So that's, the first will get us, from what I'm seeing is that'll cover this current year, the deficit, as well as the potential shortfall for 2023. And then I believe there's expectation they would come seek from the town an additional year of funding, or that projected gap. The two things that I think, and my discussions with the representatives from BACA, and also kind of ties into some questions I heard, I think there needs to be some level of accountability and coming back to the town and then presenting in the board, some further analysis of the economic impact. It was great to have Karen and Mark here today to kind of speak from their perspective, what they've seen in town, and I think I've witnessed it some myself, and in having discussion with others, that we see the impact in terms of the support and the economic impact due to the support of other businesses, the tourism that's coming, and again, Karen really touched on something that is something that we've been actually looking at. How do we do it? We have so many people who are coming to this town. We have probably the largest shoreline community in terms of marinas, and a lot of these people aren't from Brantford, but they come. And one thing I've heard from marina operators as well as others, that they come and they spend the weekend on the boat, but they don't come into town. And this is something that is that draw. So we have something here for several months out of the year. We have a draw, but we got to get them into, supporting our businesses. And this is perhaps the type of venue and organization that can help pull people to support our businesses. So I think to have, continue to track that economic impact, whether it's through data or other stories that we're hearing, would be helpful. And I think to Jeff's question regarding, other grants and potential fundraising, and I know Mary said, to kind of develop a strategic plan, but also to report back, what are they doing to identify and have they pursued, and what has been the results of identifying other revenue sources, because they are out there, but it just needs to have that plan and diligence to go out and pursue it. So I think those are things that before going into the next year we would look for that information.
Yeah, we're willing to be accountable. We're not just asking for you to hand over money and then we'll go on our merry way. We're willing to show the impact of the grant. If you give us a grant, we're gonna use it effectively, and we're gonna use it to grow the organization and grow the gallery. Because, BACA is more than just a gallery. We want to pursue some of those other initiatives that we would like to provide for the town of Brantford, and I think the combination of what the gallery provides in a real way as a venue, combined with other activities that we hope to engage the people of Brantford in, I think that makes a more powerful draw for people to come to town, not just visit the gallery, yes, but also to participate in other activities and events that we want to organize throughout Brantford and bring the Shoreline community here, as opposed to Brantford people feeling that they have to go to Guilford or Madison or some other place in order to enjoy the kinds of artistic endeavors that they're looking for.
And we're hoping to do collaboration. Like Frank did say, this weekend we collaborated with the Brantford Musical Society and had a bluegrass concert, and over 40 people came. I mean, we're not just an art gallery, but we want to do the cultural part too. Right. This gives us the opportunity to grow and be able to take a little bit of breathing room to do that planning. How can we grow the cultural part with the art gallery part? And this is what we hope that you are hearing us say. And I'm just listening about the marinas, what you were just saying, how do we get it there? You need to go down and visit the marinas, and talk to them. And then if people are coming in, what can we do? And they can say, come see the gallery, go see Splash, go to Pasta Cosi.
Yeah, or have an event, have an event at the gallery that people from the marina will want to come to visit us because we're doing something special. So we have a lot of ideas, we have a lot of enthusiasm, we have a lot of creativity. We just need the support to buy this over. My goal by the third year is to have a reserve. So,
good. I like that.
All right?
All right.
So that's my goal, is to have a reserve and not have to worry, go hand to mouth all the time about paying our bills.
I got it. Questions? Comments?
No, I think it's helpful to have just in front of us the things that you've done throughout the year and attendance and things like that, because, we just see the numbers, but to understand and see what you've actually done and then what you project to do, like a calendar of events, would be really helpful.
Yeah, we can certainly report back to you on some kind of basis, just to keep you informed. 2 weeks ago, we did painting tours at Branford again. We had hundreds and hundreds of people on Main Street. It wasn't just to sell doors, paint the doors, but it was to bring people to the center of Branford, and we did that. And they were there for the entire day. They just kept coming, back and forth. They enjoyed looking at all the doors because they were so creative and artistic and beautiful. So it was like an outdoor art gallery. And so those are the kinds of activities I think that we are good at. And we're learning more and more, how to organize these activities that will draw people back to the center.
That's great. Any other questions or comments?
I'll move the resolution, Joe.
Been moved by Jeff.
Second.
Seconded by Victor. Additional discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Harry, you good?
Yes.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Carrie, thank you, folks.
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, with no other business to come before the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move it. Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by Pam. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Brantford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BrantfordTV.org.